this is a cost of living promise and leads to an inevitable question I keep asking, for which there isn't a clear response from the opposition. Is it your and Peter Dutton's intention to promise further tax cuts at the election?
Well, we've already promised important tax reform over the past year or so. I mean, we have said that small business in particular needs to be put back in a place
what about
where it
income
can survive
tax cuts, though?
and prosper. Well, we'll see what money's left. I mean, and this is the real challenge right now.
Well, you're just giving away $500 million today.
Well, let's be clear, Andrew. We've opposed over $100 billion of unnecessary Labor government spending. Show me an opposition in recent history that has done that. You have to go back to Malcolm Fraser, who blocked supply. And
are you not going to promise income tax cuts?
Well,
after suggesting you would give some of the stage 3 back.
We will always look to reduce taxes. We won't be imposing unrealised capital gains tax on hard-working Australians, farmers and small business people who shouldn't be paying those taxes. We will be delivering accelerated depreciation to small businesses where we're seeing record levels of insolvencies.
Will you be promising income tax cuts?
Well, I'm not going to give you our election policies today, Andrew. I know you're going to ask me all morning, or for as long as we go through this interview to give you. But I'm not going to go through all of our election policies today. But what I will say is that we'll continue to manage Australians' tax revenues, the revenues we get from Australians, very carefully, as we have during this parliament, as we've opposed over $100 billion of our Labor spending.
This health promise, can you see a lot more examples of this, maybe even on both sides, where someone promises something and in such a tight election race, the other side immediately says, me too?
I mean, this is cleaning up Labor's mess. This is cleaning up Labor's mess. I mean, we had bulk billing rates at 88% when we were in government. It's now down at 77%, and they're talking about taking it back to close to where it was when we were in government. I mean, this is all Labor is doing, is fixing their mess from their homegrown inflation, from their failures when it comes to health, and their failures when it comes to...
When was it at 88%?
When we were in government.
Well, in 2014 it was 82.5, then it was 84, then in 2019 it was 86.
It got up, it peaked at 88%.
Do you know when?
I haven't got the date in front of me, but it peaked at 88%.
But it was sort of 82.5 in 2014.
Yeah, and we increased it over the time we were in government. And this is exactly the point, Andrew, is Labor has failed on this. In the course of 2.5 years, they've taken it down to 77%. And we have seen Australians having to pay more in out-of-pockets, 45% increase in out-of-pockets. We've seen 40 million bulk billing sessions that have disappeared. And all Labor is doing is trying to get back to where it was when we were in government.
I'll tell you what else they're doing. They're bringing back something that's 10 years old, that infamous 2014 budget where Peter Dutton was health minister and the government suggested at the time a co-payment, $5, $7, whatever it was, on every doctor's visit. Are you
suggesting that Labor is playing politics with this?
All I'm saying is, are you concerned that could hurt you, that narrative?
Well, I tell you what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about the standard of living of Australians, Andrew, that has collapsed and unprecedented, unparalleled. We've never seen a collapse in Australian standard of living like we've seen in the last 2.5 years. Health has been part of that, but it's also been energy, it's been insurance, it's been increased personal income taxes being paid.
It's pretty bad. But what about when there were 17% interest rates and 11% unemployment?
Well,
that was a bit of a collapse in living standards.
Can I correct you on this? And this is incredibly important. The data goes right back to the 50s. We have never seen a collapse in real disposable income per person in Australia like we have seen in the last 2.5 years. Never. And I should add to that, no other peer country has seen this collapse in standard of living. That's what Labor has done to Australians. We simply can't afford another 3 years of this.
Well, there's been higher inflation and interest rates elsewhere, but notwithstanding that, the Reserve Bank cut rates during the week. Did you support that decision?
Can I just, your comment at the end there, this is incredibly important. Standard of living is what matters. It's what your income can buy. And the truth is that Australian standard of living has never seen what it's seen in the last 2.5 years.
What's the measure?
Real disposable income per person. And worse than that, Andrew, we're not going to see the standard of living we had when Labor came to power until 2031, according to the Reserve Bank. So this is the disaster that's happening.
The Reserve Bank cut rates. Do you agree with that decision?
I'm not going to get into commentary on the Reserve Bank. I never do. But what I will say is that inflation has been too high for too long in this country. Core inflation has been high.
So you're not going to say you support that decision?
Well, I'm not going to get into Reserve Bank commentary. I don't. I never have. But I will say that core inflation...
It sounds like you don't think they should have cut rates.
I just never make comments on the Reserve Bank decisions, and nor should politicians, in my view. What I will say is that core inflation has been too high for too long, that Labor's homegrown inflation has contributed to that, that Labor hasn't taken the right steps to make it easy for the Reserve Bank to bring inflation and interest rates down earlier, and the result is our standard of living has collapsed. And the average Australian family with a mortgage in this country has paid an extra $50,000 in interest payments, Andrew. $50,000 in interest payments over and above where they were before Labor came to power, since Labor came to power.
Do you think, as the markets do, we'll see more rate cuts this year?
Again, I'm not going to get into commentary on the Reserve Bank. But I'll say this, I will say this, is that the context within which the Reserve Bank makes its decisions is incredibly important, and in particular, the government's policies. If the government doesn't have a focus on productivity, if the government thinks the only way to grow the economy is to grow the population, if the government wants to keep spending at the rate that it has, and as I say, we've opposed over $100 billion of that spending, then it is incredibly difficult for any Reserve Bank to bring down inflation and interest rates at the pace that people want. And we have seen Australia at the back of the pack in bringing down rates compared to the US, the UK, Canada, New Zealand.
Their rates were higher. But the fact underlying inflation is down to nearly 3% and unemployment's just 4%, that's good news, isn't it? Finally.
Well, you know, prices aren't coming down, Andrew. And this is incredibly important. Inflation is the change in prices. Prices continue to go up. And core inflation is still above the target range.
Do you want deflation?
Well, no, I'm saying that core inflation is above the target range. It's too high and prices continue to go up.
Well, the forecast suggests it'll be under, and it's pretty much on the 3% now.
You know what? The government's forecasts haven't been reliable. They thought
the banks.
They thought, let's talk about the bank's forecast. The bank's forecast is that it's going to take till 2031 for Australia's standard of living to get back to where it was when Labor came to power. That's the government's plan in action. That is where we're at right now. We have to accelerate that, and it does mean sensible policies on driving productivity, on making sure we clean up our construction sector, on getting affordable, reliable energy into our system, on financial services and making sure people have access to affordable loans. All of these things are absolutely essential if we're going to make sure that we get our standard of living back to where it was